My guest today is Guy Royse. Guy, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, but I like to always say that I'm doing fair to Midland because that feels kind of friendly and slightly hick.
I'm gonna go with great. You're gonna be a hick and be great, right?
Yeah, I'm fantastic. Yeah, I'm doing great. It's a Monday morning, and I know where my children are. So
all right, I'm doing Midland. Thanks for asking. It's been a couple of years since you've been on my show, and remind us what you do for a living.
I am a developer advocate. I work for Reddis, which perhaps you've heard of. We have this really popular product that's primarily used as a cache, but can be used for all sorts of other things. And that's probably the extent of plugging work that I'm going to do for this podcast.
No, that's all right. But Reddis, I always think of as it is to caching what Kleenex is to tissue paper.
It really is, yeah.
It's like the I don't know even who's in second place in that industry.
But other people selling Redis, yeah.
like Microsoft.
Yeah. Actually, Microsoft is selling our product, so that sure. we have a deal with them. So
yeah, absolutely.
You're buying the real deal when you use Azure.
I think off track here. Yeah,
we used
to have this product. It was codenamed Velocity, and then it had a boring real name. And I don't think it exists anymore. I think we just said, you know what, just use Redis. So.
Yeah.
Okay, let's. But we're going to talk about your day job. We're talking about one of your hobbies, one of your many hobbies.
Yeah.
We want to talk. Last time you were on the show, we did the topic was software-defined radio. So we talked about using the computer as a radio, and but I want to get more analog here, more hands-on, more hardware. We're talking about ham radio, which has been around a lot longer than computers have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us about what's. Well, first of all, I'm dying to know the origin of the term ham radio.
So it's actually kind of interesting where the term ham radio comes from. Everyone says ham, and some people think it's an acronym. Even some ham radio operators think it's an acronym. And
that would have been my guess.
Yeah, and you'll see people on subreddits and stuff like that. They'll spell ham in ham radio in all capital letters like it's an acronym, but it's totally not an acronym at all. It goes back to the 19th century and telegraph operators.
Okay.
So early radio was all Morse code. So the ships would go across the ocean and they would they'd use like their spark gap transmitters and stuff like that. They'd sit there and, do the straight key, tap out, their various codes. And so radio had its earliest days is an extension of telegraphy. And culturally it inherits from that. And then eventually they added audio voice modes. They call them phone modes because as opposed to CW, which is continuous wave. And there's lots of other modes, some of them digital, some of them analog, but they're all using hardware. But back in the telegraph days, people would have this idea of their fist. See, because when you're keying Morse code with your finger, or if you're using paddles,
all right,
you have it's kind of like handwriting. You got little habits you make where you drop off when you do this word, you drop it off, or this letter, you do a particular way that's just slightly off. And telegraph operators could recognize that between each other, and they would call it your fist. That was the term for it. Someone who was a bad operator was ham-fisted. And
like they had a couple of big hams on the end of each of their arms.
Yeah. Just like we kind of use the word today, right? When we use that expression ham-fisted, it meant the same thing back then, but it actually had an extra. It was a clever pun, right? And then when that went into radio, and then you get all these amateur operators who were using radio that were non-professional, they were hams because they, short for ham-fisted because they were just not that skilled of an operator.
It was a derogatory term.
Right. And then it started out as a derogatory term, and then the community took it and made it their own, and now we're all hams.
Okay. All right. Yeah, sure. Fine. Call me that. I'm gonna own it.
Yeah, it's kind of fun, right? It's it's surprising. When I learned about this, I was really surprised about how far back it went. And that's actually the thing about radio is people don't realize how old amateur radio is. On my bookshelf back there, for those who are watching and not listening, I have a book, which you can't see, but it's this tome. It's probably about 3 inches thick. And it's the ARRL Handbook for Radio. And they produce one every year. And this one is the 100th anniversary edition.
Wow.
That I bought a couple of years ago. And so, and there were some years they didn't produce them because during like World War II, they shut down all ham radio communication for security reasons. And so there's some years where they didn't publish them. But the ARRL it's sort of like the AAA for amateur radio operators, and they advocate with the government. They got lobbyists, that kind of thing, and they make publications. They got a website. They coordinate activities and stuff like that. And they produce this book every year, and they've been in existence for over 100 years. So that's how old radio is amateur radio is as a hobby. And so, and there's a lot of terminology in it that kind of reflects that age. So like ham radio is the one that everyone just sort of knows, but within radio, they have like when you're on the radio and you're talking to someone and you don't have a purpose or a goal, you're just shooting the breeze, right? They refer to that as rag chewing, which sounds very sounds like it comes out of the 20s, right, or the 30s. I mean, I think part of the reason they call it rag chewing is because you're not allowed to swear on the radio, because otherwise you'd be shooting something else, right? You're someone who's like an older operator that's teaching a younger one, or someone that's more experienced, is referred to as an Elmer, which is like, does anyone name their kid Elmer anymore? You know,
that's so Elmer Fudd.
Yeah, that's what everyone thinks of, right? And when Elmer Fudd was created, that was like a name that people might have had, you know, but now no one does that. So yeah, a lot of this radio stuff is really old, and a lot of the culture around it has got some elements that kind of date back, and the term ham radio itself is one of those.
Are you active on your ham radio?
Not as active as I'd like to be, but I am active. I'm a member of a couple of amateur radio clubs, and we have what are called nets. One club in particular I'm a member of has a net every Monday night. So there's one tonight where we get on, and it's really just everyone gets on one frequency, or in our case on a repeater, but on one frequency or on a repeater, and it takes turns talking about a topic. Oh,
so they actually have a purpose. It's not just rag chewing.
Well, it's sort of, this is structured rag chewing. Because the topics are usually, so someone will be net coordinator. So it's radio, right? So if you talk at the same time, you're talking over each other. It's simplex. Right. And so someone has to coordinate who talks. And so the first thing they do is they get on the frequency and they say, they announce that we're kicking off this network, blah, 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 blah. And someone who is net control. And then they ask for check-ins. And then everyone says their call sign. Okay. And then they write them all down.
Present.
Yeah, and then if somebody talks over top of each other, they say, "Well, I heard the end of this, and then someone else doubled with you." So, and then they try again until we get all the call signs written down. Mm-hmm. And then the person who's net control announces the topic for the nets and says, "We're going to talk about what your favorite type of pie is, whatever, right?" And then they'll just call people in order, mm-hmm. and so they'll sort of hand the communication back and forth and coordinate the communication, because otherwise everyone would be talking over each other.
Got it. Pumpkin.
Pecan. Yeah.
Oh, man, I changed my vote.
It's actually, what's your favorite pie is a fun question, because if you ask an American, it's going to be pumpkin, pecan, apple, something like that, right? Yeah. In the UK, it's going to be like steak and ale, or kidney, or pork. But yeah, that's actually kind of a lot of I feel like I dove into the details of ham radio a little bit and how it works, but sort of the culture around it, but probably a little soon, and maybe some context might be helpful for folks.
Go for it.
But we're kind of on the topic of what you do on the radio.
Yeah. I'm curious what you do. I mean, you have a practical application, since you're, I won't say an avid user, but certainly more than I am.
Yeah. So there's several different activities that people do on the radio, on the air. Some people honestly just listen a lot, which can be a lot of fun. Uh-huh. some people get on and they use it as a way to talk with other radio nerds. I find that when people are rag chewing, what they usually talk about is basically two things. Three things. They talk about the weather where they're at. They talk about their health problems. And they talk about radio and their equipment. Right. Those are the three things that ham radio operators tend to talk about. The hobby does skew towards those who are older. I'm on the young side for a ham radio operator, but I'm not the youngest in our club. But it is a good hobby for when you're in retirement, because it's like if you're into, say, like, I know, David, you like to bike.
I do.
But there's going to come a point where you really shouldn't get on a bike anymore in your life, right?
Reluctantly agree with that statement.
Unfortunately, tragic though it be, that's just kind of how. Or if you're into motorcycles or fast cars, there's going to come a point where you shouldn't be driving a fast car anymore.
Yeah, but I'll be able to listen to a radio a lot longer than I'll be able to ride a bike.
Yeah, because to talk on the radio, all I need to do is I need to grab this and push the button, and talk. I just have to push buttons and talk, and you can do that well into your 90s, honestly. So, and people do. So some of it is just getting on and talking with people, structured or not structured, depending on the frequency and the bands and that kind of stuff, and how they work. Some different modes work differently when you talk over top of each other. Some of them create interference, and some of them create you can just hear both. So it depends on the type of transmitting you're doing. Some people do what's called traffic handling. And so there's these networks for handling traffic. And so, like what a telegram is, right? Maybe young people have no idea what a telegram is anymore, but I know what they are. Well, there's a comparable idea that's
like a text message that somebody has to
deliver
out and deliver to your house.
And they were originally sent over telegraph. Well, that sort of traffic handling can be done over radio. They call them radiograms. And people do it kind of for fun. And so I can like join a net here in Columbus on a local repeater, where I live in Columbus, Ohio, and send a message to that addressed to some other call sign. And then they will relay that message faithfully in its exact wording through several intermediaries until it gets to the person wherever they are, that's the recipient of that traffic. And so then you got a little piece of paper and you write it down, and then they give it to them, or they call them up or email them or whatever. Now this may seem silly because I could just email my friend, but it's what it is it's practice for an emergency. So if you're say you live in the Carolinas and a bunch of stuff just got destroyed by a hurricane, but there's a ham radio operator down there, and they can get messages out of the disaster area with just a battery and a radio. Then they can take messages from people, get on a net, send them out, and then people that are in the disaster area can get messages to loved ones saying, "Hey, I'm alive and I'm fine," or that sort of stuff. So it's really good community service.
I get that. I remember when 9/11 happened in 2001, and we couldn't get to the internet.
Yeah,
the internet so many people were on the internet that websites didn't load anymore. Is this an alternate form that doesn't use
absolutely
bandwidth?
Yeah, because the cell phones went down then too, because everyone is trying to.
Too. Yeah.
Well, there's actually two things that happen in that scenario.
Systems were overloaded.
One is they get overloaded, and two, the emergency services lock down a portion of the cell phone network for their exclusive use.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and so the amount of available, shall we say, circuits, even though that's the wrong metaphor, gets reduced, and the traffic increases. So it's like all of a sudden you can't drive in the HOV lane, right?
Yeah, but the same thing happens if there's a tornado in a localized area.
Right.
Nobody can get their cell phones don't work. Maybe the towers are down.
Yeah.
And there's one more opportunity to send those messages.
Yeah. But with a radio, depending on the mode you're operating and distances, all I need is a battery. And I bought like 100 amp hour battery to power my radio. I think I can transmit for 2 days solid using this battery. And my radio and a piece of wire in a tree, and I can use that to communicate actually anywhere around the world if conditions are good.
What's the tree for?
To hold the other end of the antenna. So depending on the frequency that you're operating at, the characteristics of how it propagates, the radio waves propagate, vary. And depending on the frequency you're operating at, the nature of your antenna needs to vary. At high frequencies, like VHF and UHF, made famous by television, the antennas are measured in meters or centimeters. They're not very big. So like a 2-meter band is 150 hertz exactly, but it's in ham radio in the US, it's 144 to 148 megahertz. And it's called 2-meter because it's the physical wavelength for the speed of light is approximately 2 meters long, one full wave. And so your antenna needs to be ideally about half that length for it to work effectively. Those signals will get to the horizon and they'll get to space, but they can't get around the Earth. They won't bounce. They can't curve. The signals for lower frequencies will bounce off the ionosphere and you can get around the curvature of the Earth, and so they can get much further. So, but the antennas for those tend to be horizontal as opposed to vertical. And say you're operating in the 40-meter band, well, that means half of a wavelength is 20 meters. So my antenna is 20 meters long. And so what I do is I string it from my radio to a tree. So I can literally, like, I have an arborist throw that I use to throw a piece of cord up into a tree, and then I could tie my antenna to it and pull the antenna over the to get it up in the tree. Our radio club has a little air compressor powered tennis ball gun where it's got like a tennis ball with a piece of fishing line
going over the top of the tree.
Yeah, and then we'll pump it up with like one of those little battery or those car powered air compressors for like emergency service. Like if you get a flat tire, you got the little air pump in your car.
Right.
We pump it up with that air from that, and then we, just aim it up and and shoot it into a tree. Cool. And it's kind of fun, actually. It's like a pneumatic potato cannon. So that's what the tree's for, is just to hold the other end of the antenna. But the exciting part, the cool part is that all I need is electricity, a radio, and an antenna that I can get up in the air somehow. And tree is a very convenient way to do that. And I can communicate worldwide based on conditions. If the ionosphere is in a particular state, the signals will bounce better. If it's not as good, they won't bounce as well. And so it's not as reliable necessarily. It's fairly reliable, but there's cycles and it depends on the weather and stuff like that. So but if you're in a disaster area, getting out of like a hurricane disaster area, which could easily go past the horizon, right?
Right.
Then you could it's pretty easy to get out of that area to like I can easily transmit anywhere in the eastern United States here in central Ohio without even really trying that hard. So that was a little rambly. Sorry. Yeah.
Tell me a little about the technology involved in the ham radio. Like, what's the hardware that you get?
So, so the hardware can be inexpensive or very expensive. You can spend as much as you want. Just like any hobby, you can spend as much money as you want to. I have the radio I have is what they call an all bands, all mode radio. But the hardware you buy is going to vary depending on the bands you want to operate on. Bands being bands of the radio spectrum. And so you need a radio that can transmit and receive. If you want to transmit, obviously, if you want to just receive, then that's a lot easier. If you want to just listen to radio, you can watch our podcast about software defined radio, and that's a good, cheap way to get in. But if you want to transmit, then you need to buy a proper radio, and that can be anything from like let's see, I got one here, small little handheld radio like this.
Okay.
This will transmit on 2-meter and 70 centimeter bands, which is roughly 146 megahertz for 2-meter and like 440 megahertz for 70 centimeter. But this little radio right here is a cheap Baofeng, which I'm told is Chinese for thunder. Okay. And they're like $25 on Amazon. And maybe they're 30 now, but they're very inexpensive. It does 5 watts of power, and I can reach pretty much the horizon. That's about it. If I hit a repeater, which is existing infrastructure, it can pick up my signal and repeat it on a particular frequency, and then I can get a lot further because those repeaters are on towers.
Huh. Are those common?
Yeah. Most big cities and even small towns will have them because some amateur radio operator will be there and they want it to exist, so they spend their money and buy the hardware, and then they'll talk to someone that's got a tower and convince them to let them put it on the tower for free. So, like, if you get ham radio operators in like a small town might put their money together, buy a repeater, like a club might do this,
Okay.
and then they'll have someone that's a ham radio fan that works for the fire department. The fire department has a tower that they use for all their radio equipment to coordinate their activities, and then there's space on the tower, and so they put the repeater on there, and then the hams now have access to it.
Interesting. I have no idea.
Yeah, here in Columbus, the biggest repeater is on top of the state of Ohio's office building, which is right next to the Capitol building, which is the highest point in Ohio. The roof of that, and there's a repeater that's up there, and it can get to like 60, 70 miles away. So with my little handheld here, I can get 60 miles away as long as that repeater's on and powered. Other radio here I have, it's you can't see it because it's out of the camera view here, but I have another radio which was not $25. It was more like $1,200, and it can transmit on HF, which is the lower frequency stuff that will bounce off the ionosphere and let you communicate around the world. But also does all the things that this one does. But this one puts out 5 watts. The other one puts out 100 watts, and so it's a much more powerful radio. But the hardware is it's all basically analog. The technology behind all of these radios is analog. So this guy here just does FM modulation, which is vary the frequency with the sound, and it's an analog transmission. It's using digital circuits and digital chips internally to do that, and so it's analog in the same way that a CD is analog.
Okay.
Which is to say that like if you take a compact disc, it's actually digital, but that's the only part that's digital. Everything, the speakers and all that kind of stuff are all analog devices.
I see.
These radios are analog in that same sense. And so it is fundamentally an analog technology. There are digital modes, but they're laid on top of the analog technology. So like with any of these radios that I have here, there's ways of communicating people with. You can talk to them, right? You can do CW, which is continuous wave, which is Morse code, and so you're keying at people.
People still do that.
Oh yeah, it's actually quite popular. It doesn't require as much power. So for me to work to talk to someone, say in Australia on my radio, which is particularly hard in the US, I need a fair bit of power to get that far, and the weather conditions have to be right and everything. But if I'm using CW, if I'm using Morse code to do it, I don't have to. There's less data to be encoded on the signal, and so you don't need as much bandwidth, literal bandwidth, like width of the spectrum,
right,
to do CW, because it's just on or off.
Right.
Whereas if you're doing audio, you need like 3 kilohertz of bandwidth, minimum, to do that effectively. And so, correspondingly, you need less power to then send the CW signal. And so 20 watts will get you anywhere in the world on CW. Generally, for voice, you need like 100 watts to get pretty much anywhere in the world.
How did you get started in this hobby?
Oh, it actually it started with software defined radio, actually, but indirectly. So people will take these software defined radios and put them on the web, and then you can go to this website and then just tune the radio. It just sort of samples the entire spectrum and streams it to you, and then you can tune your radio and listen to different parts of the spectrum. And I discovered one of these sites years ago, and I'm like, oh, this is really neat. There's all these signals out there that I didn't know about. I'm listening to ham radio. People talk to each other, picking up shortwave stations from all over the world, that kind of stuff. And so then I bought a hardware SDR and started playing with myself.
SDR, software defined radio.
Yeah, software defined radio. Yeah, I bought one myself and started playing with it. And then I found all these data modes that are on there, and I wanted to interact with them. And in order to interact, I had to get my license. And so I went out and got my license, and then discovered there's this whole world of communication out there. And there's all these clubs and all this infrastructure that you didn't know was there, and all these activities, and people are getting on, and they're just, they're rag chewing, they're sending traffic, and sometimes they're doing it with Morse code, or they're doing it with voice, or they're doing it with various digital modes where they encode digital data over top of the audio signal, just like a modem back in the day would encode digital data over the phone line. They're doing it over the voice channel they've created over radio.
Got it.
And
modulation, demodulation.
Yeah. And they're just, so they're and I just wanted to be part of it. I'm like, this is fun. It's kind of like, I compare it to like vinyl records.
Okay.
Right. Vinyl record, and, most people are just using Spotify, right? But people have gotten into vinyl records because it makes music a thing as opposed to just more data.
Right.
And it gives you a physical object, right? As opposed to,
you can read the liner notes while the song is playing.
Yeah. And radio kind of is like that for the internet in my mind. It's a old way of connecting, but it's completely, there is infrastructure in like repeaters and stuff like that, but you don't have to use it. You can use, you can just communicate point to point. And so all you really need is a radio and a battery, and you can talk to other people that have radios and batteries. And there is no centralization to it. It's fully decentralized. Except, of course, the fact you need a license to do it legally. Yeah.
Hey, we're just about at time. What advice would you give people that want to get started in this hobby?
Honestly, the best way to get started in this hobby would be to go to YouTube and start looking at videos about amateur radio and see what's there. It's a technical field. It's a good hobby for people who are technologists that want to do something that is sort of still technical, but 15 degrees off of like mainstream programming and that kind of stuff. And as a result of that, you are going to find videos where it's all trees, no forest, where they dive into all these details and you don't have any context to figure it out. But there are other videos that are really good that will provide that context. And so that's the best place to start. Mm-hmm. If you can go to the ARRL.org, that's the American Radio and Relay League. They're the advocacy organization for amateur radio operators, and find clubs and places to go and take your amateur radio license. And you can find there's a bunch of online practice tests and stuff if you want to get your license. And so, yeah, it's a fun hobby. Obviously, everyone likes to promote their hobbies, but it's a technical, detailed thing. And I don't get bored with it because there's always a new angle to explore. It's very deep. It's a very deep hobby.
Guy, I love talking to you, and I love talking about things that I know nothing about. So this has been a really enjoyable 30 minutes. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Technology is a fantastic mechanism to meet new people and make new friends. Ham radio is one of them.